How's it going, everyone? I am Jeremy Alexander and welcome back to another platformer tutorial. So in this tutorial, what we're going to be covering is we're going to be adding in the coins that we didn't add in the last lecture, and we're going to add in our HUD for our player health and for our coins collected. Then we're going to move on to doing our signs and reading off of our XML sheets that we've imported. So what we're going to do first, we're going to set up our coins and we're going to set up our HUD, and this is actually going to incorporate our player health, so we're actually going to now take damage from our spikes when we hit them. So if we test and we kind of die, that's just going to be something that we'll have to deal with here. So what I need to do is I need to unlock the entities layer. And I'm going to take my object coin and I'm going to give it a behavior of sine wave. So I'm going to type in SIN and hit enter just to grab the sine wave. It'll fill out the rest of SINE for me. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the movement type from being horizontal, and again, the horizontal movement. And you should mess around with all these movement types because there's a lot and they're very, very useful. You can create some really cool effects. The horizontal movement is just going to move left and right, or left to right. So it's something that I like to use, but not for this effect. What we're going to do for this effect is we're going to grab the movement and we're going to actually set the movement to be the width. When we do this, what we want to have happen here is we want it to expand a little bit, almost like it's rotating like it was a 3D coin. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to put the period down to 1 second, and the magnitude is only going to go down to 3. Now, you can mess around with the magnitude all you want. If you want to make it a little bit bigger, it'll look a little more squashed than you might like, but I found that 3 looks like a coin that is wobbling back and forth. So let me bring this over to our project here. Let me exit out of its behaviors, and let's just see what that looks like when I hit play, just so you can see. So just like that, you can see how our coin looks. It actually is kind of scaling a little bit. Maybe I kind of squished it a little bit. Let's see. It's at 8 by 8. I think I could scale this up to 16 by 16 and get away with it. I don't think that'll look too bad. I'm not sure if I did that in the other project or not, but I did because that looks a lot more correct there. But now you can actually see that it's going to create this slight effect that looks good in a retro style game. So what we're going to do is we're going to program in for our collision, and before we do that, I just want to go over the platforms that we were having trouble with. We were having trouble with the vertical platforms in the last lecture because I had forgotten that the vertical platforms need to have bounce off solids turned to no, and as soon as you do that, they will obey their collision parameters and they will collide up and down with no problem whatsoever. Another thing that I added here was I just kind of moved everything up a little bit and I snapped it to the top left origin point, and that way I can actually have it be inside the tiles here for the horizontals that do bounce off the solids, and I put it to the bottom, I think, for over here for our vertical collision, just so I could have some room with moving this around. So hopefully you've been able to mess around with that and fix your platforms, but that is what I did to fix ours. And what we're going to do now is we're going to put coins all over, and this is something that I'm really excited about because coins are pretty much the classic gameplay element to have. You want your player to collect coins or XP or something like that, and then you want it to affect the HUD and you want it to affect your gameplay. Now, something that I noticed is really cool is the placement of your coins, which we'll get into in a second here. So what I want to do is I want to go to my event sheet, and let's actually put this into our paused event sheet. So let's hit B on the keyboard, and let's make this for our collision. So what we want to do is double click and go to our player. We want to say on collision with another object, and in this case we want to collide with our object coin. And if we collide with the coin, what we want to have happen is we want the coin to destroy itself, because that's what would happen. We just want the coin to go away. So we're going to go coin, type in DES, and then it'll search for destroy, and we're going to have the coin destroy itself. Now this is the part where we need a variable. We need something to control our HUD element to actually add what we just collected. So to do this, we're going to hit V on the keyboard, and this is going to create a global variable. Now you could separate your global variables into another event sheet if you want, and then you can include it back here. I know that's a very common way to organize your project. I'm just going to put all these here so you can actually just see everything right on this event sheet. So I'm going to call this coins collected, and you know what, let me do all lowercase so we can kind of keep with that lowercase and underscore theme. And let's hit OK. And I can actually give this a description just to help you out. This will be the variable to hold the coins collected. Okay, cool. So what we're going to do when we destroy the coin is we're going to add one. So to add one to a global variable, we're going to go to System, Add to, Coins Collected 1, just like that. And that is pretty much all we have to do for that. We want to make a note here, so I'm going to hit Q on the keyboard to make a comment that we want to add the coin collected sound, but we should be good from there. Add the coin collected sound, and let's group this and call this our coin group. We could call it coin collision, whatever we want here, but this is what we're going to call this, and we're done for that. So let me put that in there, and we're done. Now we have our coins programmed, which is really nice. And now all we need to do is we need to display our HUD. So let's actually do that before we spread these coins out some more. What we're going to do is we're going to make our HUD, and we're going to make all elements within our dotted line here. So you can still see the dotted line, and if not, I can kind of get rid of all of our stuff here, and you should be able to see the dotted line a little bit better there. What we're going to do is we're going to take everything in this dotted line, and we're actually going to set the parallax rate of it to be 0 by 0. So let's actually do that. Let's make a new layer for this because it unfortunately needs to be on its own layer. So if you were using the free version, make sure you merge some layers together here and have a HUD on a separate layer altogether, because what we need to do is we need to select this layer and we need to go down here where it says parallax. If we have these parallaxing at not 0 by 0, it'll actually parallax the layer just like you would see in any other kind of platformer game where the background moves slower than the foreground. But we're not going to do that for this. What we want to do here is we want to make this static so this doesn't move. So to do that, we're just going to hit 0 and 0. And then one other thing we need to do is we need to change the scale rate. So we want to turn the scale rate down. And as it says right here, the scale rate is the rate the layer scales as the scale changes. So even though we're not really scaling anything, we still want to set that to 0 just because it's the HUD layer. So what I want to do here is I want to clone this. So I want to right click, clone this object type, and let's actually make it 16 by 16 again. And let's call this object coin HUD. And let's put this at the top right of our dotted line. So let me again get rid of this so you can see where our dotted line is. It's right here. And let's put this, let's turn snap to grid off, and let's put this right there. So let me put this back. Let me hit save and let me hit play. And you should be able to see when I move around, this follow along with our camera object here, which is what we wanted, which is why we have the scale rate at 0 and why we have our parallax rate at 0, because this is now a static layer that's overlaying. And the only way it's going to overlay is if it's in the window size here, if it's within the dotted lines. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we need a way to actually display this variable coins collected. And to do so, we're going to make a sprite font. So I'm going to double click here. I'm going to make a new sprite font, not this. This is a plugin that you can download. I'm going to actually grab the sprite font that comes with Construct 2, and I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to exit out. Now, this is the default sprite font, and as I showed you before, we have a purchase folder that has a sprite font that we are going to use for this project. Later on, I'm going to show you where you can get sprite fonts like this, but you can use the default sprite font. It really doesn't really impact that much other than your own personal style. But if you are going to purchase a sprite font or any sprite font from the store, what you get to do from there is double click on it and just open up your assets folder, and let's locate to the purchase folder and grab our sprite font and hit OK. Now this is a different kind of sprite font where we have two different color schemes and it's all lowercase, so I'll explain it in a second. But what I need to do here is I just need to set up the sprite font, and the only thing I have to do for it is change the character width from 16 to 8. And then I kind of want to scale it up a little bit. Well, actually, let's see how that looks first. And let's just call this SF for sprite font HUD. Because the one thing you can do with this is you can clone it and you can rename it. Actually, let's call this SF HUD coins. This is going to be apparent for when we do menu stuff because the text for the menus doesn't really matter. So this object can be the same, but for this is going to actually have a variable attached to it, so it does matter. So let's hit play and let's see how that looks, just to see the sprite font scale. Okay, so I do want to scale it up a little bit because otherwise it's just going to be a little too small. So let's put this scale to 2, and therefore let's make the sprite font a little bit bigger. And feel free to, again, use whatever sprite font you want, or if you want to use the default, it really does not matter. In this case, if you have, for this sprite font, if you have an uppercase letter, or if I had to type this all in uppercase, it'll be gold. If you use lowercase, it'll be this bluish color. So I'm going to kind of combine this here and just leave it as text. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our event sheet, and on our every tick, I'm going to set the text of this to be our coins collected. So I'm going to go every tick, add the action. And what I want to do here is I want to add to the SF HUD coins. Right here is our sprite font object. And what I want to do here is I want to type in set text, double click that. And I don't need to put any string. I just need to put in coins collected and hit OK. And when I hit save here, you should see that it should go to 0 because there are no coins collected, and because that's what coins collected equals. And when I go and collect that coin, if I could reach it, there we go, it now equals 1. So every coin I collect from there on in is going to just automatically be updated. Now I see that I actually have some room here, so I can actually just move these guys over to as close to the window as I would like. You can design the HUD however you prefer. And there you go. So now we have our coins in place, and I can actually move this up a little bit, and you can mess around with that all you want. So let me actually start to put these coins throughout the map. And this is something that you can do wherever you want. You can put coins wherever. I'm just going to touch upon this really quickly here. What I want to do is I want to copy and paste a few of these. Let's snap it to the grid to see if I can get a better... it's going to kind of create this, because I have everything centered versus at the top left. But that's fine for right now. So let's put as many coins as we want here. What you want to do with this is you want to put the coins close to the spikes, because the closer you put the coins to the spikes, the more people are going to automatically click, and they're going to automatically go towards the spikes, which is what you want in the long run. So let me put some over here. I put some up here, even though I don't have any spikes. Let's put some right here is cool. Why not? In between the spikes, and we can put some over here as well. I'm going a little bit overboard here versus what I had in the demo, but that's okay because I just kind of want to show all the environment stuff that you can do. It's fun to put some ones that are even harder to reach. This is a very possible jump to make, but it's not a first time jump. You would have to wall jump off of here to grab these coins, which is a fun one. But here is where I wanted to get to. I wanted to get to something like this. This is the ultimate level design trap, in my opinion. It's hard to see these spikes, and it's going to be very easy to see this entire row of coins I'm going to put here. So I'm going to copy all these because they had more, and I'm going to paste them right here. And I realize I just put all of these on the HUD, so I'm going to actually have to fix this in a second. But what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of create this, a trail of coins. And let me fix this by putting more in here. And let's create a third layer of this, like so. This should be pretty good, and I can even move this over with the arrow keys here. This is going to be very tempting to your player. If you haven't played the layer before, you're not going to notice these spikes when you're coming down this platform at all. You're going to jump right here into the middle, and the spikes are going to hit you. And this is a classic trap, and I love traps like these because they're very simple to make, and they actually just work so well. I swear this, I designed this level, and this trap has fooled me more than once. And it's not that it's fooled me to the point where I'm angry and I die, but it's fooled me to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, I put spikes there. So you can continue to put them throughout your map however you like. What I need to do now is I need to actually make a new layer for these coins because I forgot that I was on the HUD layer. And all these coins would just track my every move, and I don't want that. So I'm going to add a new layer here, and I'm going to rename this to BR. Let's think. Well, these are our coins, so we can actually just call this our pickups because we're going to have our actual health pickup as well when our enemy drops it. And so let's put this right underneath the HUD layer should be good. Let's select every single coin object that we need. So like this, and fortunately we can pretty much grab all of these without interfering with the HUD. For the most part, we should be able to. Yep, we did for the most part. That didn't work. Let's try that again. Select all, or I could actually just hit Control A and then I can deselect these. That's what I was trying to do before. The deselect didn't want to work. So Control A, deselect these guys, and one more time, deselect these guys, and we're going to right click, move to layer, pickups. Cool. And let's move this guy to pickups as well, or he's on the entities layer. Let's right click and move to layer pickups. Awesome. Okay, so now we have our coins, and this might be a little too high for these coins. I might want to put these down a little bit more. But now we have our coins, and they effectively act as a trap just as much as the spikes do. So let me just copy and paste a few more here. I'm trying to think where else we want to put them. We want to put them down here where we'll have an enemy. We want to put them on top of these arrows where you're like, oh man, now I got to collect these coins. And we'll put them right there. And let's think what else. And now all of these have the sign behavior, so they're all going to move left and right and just kind of look like a coin. Okay, cool. So I think that's good for the coins for right now, and I think we are done with that part of the HUD. So let's add in our player health. You can see now that we have coins, and we're like, oh man, let's go grab those. And now we actually have something for the player to do that's more than just running, jumping, and trying not to die. We actually have a purpose here for this level, and that is to collect these coins. Now, I didn't actually include anything that these coins could purchase, but you could easily make a purchasing system where you say, if you complete this level with, I don't know, 70 coins, then you get this, or something like that. There's a bunch of things that you could do with coins, and I think that's the whole point of having the coins, is to upgrade your character or put them in. But I also see it as a way to actually lure the player into going over a trap. So let's go here, let's go through this trap, and let's go down here. And you can see that you're just going to jump, and those things are just going to attack you, and you're not even going to expect it. The other thing I did here with this platform, as I touched upon it before, was I brought it down. I brought the collision back down a little bit more. So if you were stranded and you didn't get the power up, you can still jump up at the last second and get onto the platform in case you didn't get the power up the first time. Okay, so that's our coins. Let's actually add in our health. So we already have our health bar. Let's right click and move it to the layer of our HUD. And let's put this over here to the top left corner. Let's move this up, something like this, and let's hit save, and let's hit play, and let's see what happens there. So now we actually have our HUD right up there, and it's actually being animated. So what we need to do to fix this is we need to double click on this, and we need to go to our default animation right here, and we need to change the speed from 5 to 0. And then what we could do is we could actually set the individual frame speed to be 0, but right now, by turning the default speed down to 0, we should be good. So let's hit save, and let's see if that fixed our issue. It did. Okay, great. So now we actually have our health up there, and it's running. So what we need to do now is, I actually did not close out of NWJS. So let me close out of that real fast, and I'll be right back. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to have our count go down. So as we lose health, we want this to go from image to image. Now, of course, you can subtract health, but we're going to actually add, and this is just an easier way and a different way to approach a health system like this. So what we're going to do, we already have our health variable here, and it's at 0. Now, usually what I do, and we're going to do this for the boss, is we give all of our entities a health of 100, because that way you're just always setting them up to have a health bar or something like that, or they could do... You could do a very intense attack system where they lost a percentage of their health if they had this weapon or something like that, just so you had the room to do something like that. But since this is a classic platformer type of game, I just went for a very basic health system that we are going to count up, which is then actually going to subtract. So let me explain this a little bit further by setting it up. So let's go back to our event sheet here. In our pause group, let's hit B. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, if our player's health, so we're going to go to compare instance variable, if our player's health is greater than or equal to 6, I believe, because there's 6 health bubbles for him, then what we want to have happen is we want our player to die. So in this case, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just restart the layout. So let's actually go system and type in restart, because we're going to create our death event in a little bit here, because we want to actually have that layout to go to when we die. But this is going to take care of that. And what this is going to do is it's going to count down from 6. So if it's greater than 6, and the reason why I'm saying greater than is because it's at 0. Of course, you could do this the other way, and you could have this be at 6, and you could have it count down. It really doesn't matter. Whatever way works for your brain is perfectly fine. And this is honestly just another way that you can program something like this. So if the health is greater than or equal to 6, we're going to right now restart the layout. What I want to do is I want to do a check to see what happens if it goes below 0. So to do that, I'm just going to copy and paste this. And if it is less than 0, then we're going to set it back to 0. So let's just go add action to our player. Let's set the value of our health to 0. So now we actually have the check to see what happens, and this is going to fix any bugs that would go below. But now we actually need to add 1 to health, and we actually need to tie that in with our health bar here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a function. So let's hit B on our pause group, and let's double click, and let's go to our plugins function, on function. And what we want to do for this function is we want to call this our player, we can call this our health function, and hit OK. And on the health function, all we need to do is make a sub event for it, and we want to say trigger once, so system trigger once while true. We want to add 1 to health, so let's go do that. Let's go to our player, add 2, health, just like that, and let's hit OK. So when we add the 1 to health, this is going to take care of adding from 0, and it's going to go all the way up until 6, and if it's greater than or equal to 6, that means we died. So that means that we are going to restart the layout. And when we actually have health pickups, this is going to check to see if we're going below 0, and then we're just going to reset it back to 0. So what we're going to do to actually tie in the animation frames for this is we're going to go to our event sheet, and in our every tick, we're going to set the frame of our HUD health object. So let's go animations set frame to be object player dot health. And when I hit save here, this is going to now equal the first frame. So it's going to be at frame 0, and frame 0, as we know, is the full health frame. Now when we add 1, it's going to equal 1, so it's going to go to frame 1, and same thing 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you can see the easier way. If it's easier for you to go 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, this way works just fine. They both do. So whatever way works for you, that should be our health bar. Now we actually need to call this function. We need to call the player health function for certain things, like when we collide with our spike. So let's do that. Let's actually put it in. Where would we collide? If our spike collides with our player, this is where we would have our player hurt sound and our lose health functions. So let's do that. What I can do here is I can just grab this function, control, copy and paste, and I can double click on it. I can remove the parameters, and I can just type in our player health function, and we should be losing health. Now let me copy this, and let me put this in for our arrows as well, and where we would lose it, right here, and we can delete that comment now. Awesome. So now we have our health being drained. Let me group all this together and call this our player health. Put all of this in here, and let me put this up on top with our player control. That way I kind of keep this a little bit more organized. Now usually you have a lot of options here. You can actually branch off and put all of these into different event sheets, and then you can include all of them in the pause group instead of having all of them exist in the pause group. But I thought it would be easier for you to see everything in one event sheet for now, and we're only going to split it up a little bit to handle all the other menu management stuff. So let's hit play here, and let's see, we have a full thing of health here, but when I actually here, there we go, I'm triggering it once, so I only lose 1 thing of health each time I trigger. In that case, what happened was I got pushed up, and then I lost health again. So there's 1, 2, when I stop flashing, I'll lose health again because I'm overlapping, 3, 4, and then dead, and restart. Perfect. So let's see what happens when I take damage from a spike. I could have let those spikes hit me, but I'll let the more fun spikes hit me. Perfect. And we got some more spikes here. Yeah, cool. So that is how we're tying into our HUD, and now we have actually finished setting up pretty much all the environment stuff for our game here. We have another HUD thing to add, which is a timer that we'll add at the end when we have our menu system working. But now, for right now, let's just continue by adding in our signs. Now, our signs are going to be a little bit different because we're going to add these in from our XML files. So we're going to go over our XML files and how we can add this in. We've already set up the project to handle it, and we're also going to create this really nice zoom effect that'll actually just look really cool if you ever wanted to do a more cinematic type of game, or if you wanted to have a cutscene or something like that. This zoom effect will actually help you out a lot. So we're going to do that in a moment here, so let's get started. To begin with our sign system, convo box, whatever you want to call it, let's actually set up its own layer. So we have this big convo box here, and let's make a new layer for it. Let's right click and rename and call it convo. It's just kind of like the conversation that you would have with the sign. You could call it whatever you want. And what we're going to do here is we're going to put this right underneath the HUD, and we're going to do the same thing that we did for the HUD. We're going to set the scale rate down to 0, and we're going to set the parallax down to 0 and 0 because we don't want this to move when it pops up. But that's just the thing we want to control when it pops up. So first, let's place this into our window frame, our dotted outlines. Let me highlight these again and get rid of them just so we can see where we're placing this. And let's see if this fits within the window size here. It should fit perfectly. There it goes. And what this is going to do, if I turn these back on, is this is going to be on and off. It's going to be triggered on and off when we actually need to. So let me actually put this. Why are those coins on top? Because this is not on the convo layer that I made for it. There we go. So let's hit save there and let's hit play, and you'll see this convo box follow exactly the way our HUD follows right there, and it'll stay like that. Now what we want to do is, and this is going to be true for all of our menu systems that we create, is we want to actually have this turn on and off. So we're just going to set this to active and not active, which is something that you can do with the layers. So to start, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our event sheet, and on the start of our layout, we're going to go system. We're going to type in layer, and then we're going to actually type in, I believe it's layer visible. So we're going to type in layer viz and get set layer visible, and in this case we're going to hit quotation and grab the convo layer, and we're going to set it, the visibility, to be invisible. Alright, so now that we have that done, I actually need to pop up my Notepad++ here because I want to show you how we've done our XML files. Now if you've never done, this is actually here. Let me show you this. So let's grab our tutorial. This is actually taken from a tutorial called How to Read an XML File and Make Your Game Talk, and we're actually going to combine this with another tutorial that you can find on the Skira forums where we're actually going to make the text scroll. So if you wanted to read more about this, you could. It's right here, but I'm going to go over most of it as well. And the other thing is we're using the Ajax object to actually request the XML file to be loaded. So if you're running this on your website, you can actually, as long as you export the files there and as long as they're stored, you can still access them. But if they're stored elsewhere, you're going to have to do it a different way. But for NWJS, which is what I'm targeting this for at the moment, it'll just package, it'll compile no matter what. So let me show you my Notepad++ here, and I opened up the instructions.xml file here. And in the tutorial that I showed you, which is you can just type in your basic XML, read from an XML document in the Skira forums. He has this set up. This is called the prologue, line 1 here, and this is just setting up our document for XML, and then he has his root. His root is chapter 1 here, and this is the tag that we are going to use, and we're going to use it for all of these. So what this is really saying is here's the root, and then here's the tags in between given their own IDs. So in this case, the ID is intro 1, intro 2, intro 3, and intro 4. Now these are important because this number is what we're going to be banking on for our calling each line to scroll past. So we have our text here. It says welcome. If you didn't set your controls in the menu, use WASD to move, press W or A to perform a small jump and hold for a long jump, S or X to wall slide with the power up, jump on enemy heads, collect coins, don't die, and see how fast it takes you to beat the boss. So those are instructions for the game, and this is how we set up our file. I hope that makes sense to you. If it doesn't, it's really okay because you can always read up on XML files and you can continue to look at them and you can continue to look at their structure, but really you just need to know how to load it up. And this file will be included with the download of the assets folder, so you should be able to mess around with this and figure it out for yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to exit out of this and we're going to actually create 2 text boxes. So I know that we made one already. We called it object dest text. So let's take that out and let's put this onto our convo layer here. And let's actually give the text the color of white so we can see it a little bit more clearly. And I want to use the text object because it's a little bit easier to read and just to kind of set this up, but feel free to use a sprite font if you want. It's really not a big deal to change the two. But I think that with the text object, you might be able to see it a little bit better and hopefully understand it a little bit better. So what I want to do here, and this is really important, is I want to stretch out the text box object to be as wide as I'd want it to go. Since we're going to put a button right here, or it's just going to be really like a sprite, I'm going to make it go this wide. And then what I want to do here is I want to right click and clone, and I want to put this off all the way over here. And I want to call this object source text. Source text. Now what we're going to do is we're going to load the XML data into the source text, and then the source text is going to feed the destination text. So here's how we're going to do this. The first thing we need to do is in the every tick, we need to actually set the source text to the XML. So this is going to get a little bit confusing, but that's okay. We've already imported the XML plugin and the Ajax plugin, so we're good to go. But if you didn't do that already, go do that now. What we're going to do in the every tick is we're going to go to our source text, so object source text, and we're going to set the text of our source, which they don't see, to be XML, so the XML plugin, dot string value. And this is going to get the first string. And we're going to go for chapter 1. So let's go slash chapter 1, because that was our root that we used from the tutorial. We're going to type in the next level tag, which was hint. Then this is the part that we're going to use some cool XML style wording for. We're going to use the open bracket, and we're going to hit the @ symbol. Then we're going to type in ID equals, and I'm going to use the single quote, and I'm going to type in intro. Then I'm going to close out of the single quote, and I'm going to say and. Now this is actually something where we need a variable that we haven't made yet. So let's put this to intro1. Then what we're going to do here is we're just going to say, let's think, do we want to do a double quote there? Let's just close out of this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a backslash text parentheses. And I think we need another quotation and parentheses in there to make this an entire string value here. So if this is really confusing, I do apologize, but all it's doing is reading off of the first string value from the instructions XML file. It's grabbing chapter 1's hint 1, whatever ID is, and this hint ID is going to be intro 1. Now what we want to do is we want to break up this 1 into a variable. So let's do that. Just like that tutorial said, and there's you can just Google Skira XML tutorial and you can find that exact tutorial. What we're going to call this is our number of lines, or I can actually make this with like that. And let's set it to the initial value of 1, so we give ourselves some padding. And what this is going to do is it's going to track our XML number of lines per document. Okay, cool. So what we want to do here, and I'm actually going to open this up here so you can see it. What we want to do is we want to make it so we are including the number of lines, and then we're actually closing off the text here. And this number of lines is going to change, and this is going to be how we're going to read this. So to make sure I get this right here, what I want to do is I want to actually just copy this, and then we'll go it again because I can't see it from that far away. And let's exit out of that. Let's open this back up, and let's paste this guy in here. I think I copied to like right there. No, I didn't. Like right here. And like I said before, all of this stuff is something that you can find online. And I'm just compiling all this together and presenting it in a way that is hopefully slow enough for you to understand exactly what's going on, and just talking about some points that I don't see a lot of people using to their advantage, especially with Construct 2, because you can take advantage of Construct 2 and make great games with it. So now what we have it say is xml.stringValue chapter 1 hint @id intro and number of lines, which equals 1, so intro 1. So whatever hint tag has the intro 1, and then we're just going to close out. And this is just the XML way of opening and closing lines. It's pretty much as basic as it gets in any other thing that we would use this for, but since it's XML, it has a little bit of extra syntax going on for it. But hopefully you've understood that this is just going to set the text to whatever we choose to load. All right, so now that we're through with that, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our dialog. So let's actually start. And what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to actually give our sign an instance variable. So let's bring our sign in, and let's actually lock our convo layer, and let's add a new layer and call it signs. So at this point, we're already at our 8th layer, so I have gone completely over the free limit for layers, and I do apologize about that, but it's going to be worth it in the long run to have all this organization again. So let's move this to the layer signs. Let's put this over here, and let's put this around right here where I had it, somewhere like this. And now technically you could put this signs layer underneath the tile map if you would like. Doesn't really matter there, but now you can actually hide it. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it an instance variable, not a behavior, of sign ID equals 0. Okay, so our sign ID for this sign equals 0, and that's very important because we want to have more than one sign. We want to have 4 signs that tell us what's going on in our game. So what we need to do here is we need to go to our event sheet and hit save if you haven't already. Let's make a new event by grabbing our paused group and hit B. What we want to check for to see is if our player, I was going to say sign, if our player is overlapping our sign. If we're overlapping another object, and in this case, if we're overlapping our sign object, then what we want to do is we actually want to activate our conversation layer. So if I hit save and if I hit play here, right now, the conversation layer, because we chose to hide it on the start of the layout, we can now copy and paste this and make it visible because we are overlapping our sign. Now this right here is where you could actually change it to say if you want overlapping, you could say maybe set this button to be visible. Like you could have another layer with a button over it, and you could say make this active, or you could have it create that object on top of that, and then you could hit the button. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to say if we're overlapping the sign, set the layer convo to visible. Then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add our zoom. So we're going to add that in a bit. So let's make a note here to add our zoom here. And that's just going to be another bonus feature that you can use throughout your game that I like to have in all of my games. I think it adds to the camera, especially when your camera object is standing still, centering on the player. Okay, so what we need to do here is we need to hit B on the keyboard, and we need to do this for every single sign. But since we're only going to set up, well, you know what, we're going to set up all the signs. So let's do it for all of them. What we want to do here is we want to say, go to our sign and compare the instance variable, and if it equals 0, what we want to do is we want to request the first XML sheet. So let's do that. Let's go here. Let's go to our Ajax function. So let's go plugins, Ajax, and on this we want to request a project file. So let's go request project file. We're going to give it the tag of instructions because that's what it's called, and we're going to locate the file instructions and hit OK. And what this is going to do is it's just going to load this up as the last stored. So to do this, what we need to do here is we need to make a sub event, and we need to have Ajax find out what was last stored. So let's go to our plugins, Ajax, and what we want to do here is on completed, if the tag has been successfully loaded, so in this case, the instructions tag, then what we want to do is we actually want to load the XML document. So let's go to our plugins, XML, and let's go to document load. And like it says right here, it's going to load a string containing the XML document to load. That's exactly what this action does. So we're going to load the Ajax.last data. So whatever was last requested is going to be loaded into the game. So now that we have this set up for us, now we just need to display our text somewhere. So let's do that first, and then we'll go back and we'll add in our other IDs. Or actually, you know what? We can add in all of our IDs now because it might be faster. All we have to do is copy and paste. So let's go copy and paste 0, 1, 2, 3, and there we go. So what we want to do here is change the ID to be 1, change the ID to 2, and change the ID to 3. Now there's going to be other things that we're going to have to add here. We'll do so in a second, but first let's just change this. So request, in this case, we're going to go for, let's think what we want to pick next. Let's go for the enemies, and we're going to load the file enemies.xml. And so on enemies completed, then we're done there. Same thing over here. Let's go here and let's load the power up because that's what comes next in the order of the map. And let's make sure that we're requesting the powerup.xml sheet. And then finally, let's load up our boss. So let's go here. The tag is going to be the boss. We're going to go file, boss.xml, and hit OK. And on boss completed, it's going to load the boss XML file. Okay, so hopefully you've stayed with me so far and you're understanding what's going on. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to make the text scroll from left to right, and we're going to load the text that we desire. So to do this, we're going to actually make this into a group. So let's hit G, and let's call this our XML sign, whatever you want to call it. XML sign is perfectly fine. Let's put all of this in our XML sign group, and let's hit B on the XML sign group so we can make a new blank sub event. In this blank sub event, what I want to do is double click and go system every X seconds. And in this case, I want to do it every 0.05 seconds. So what we're doing is we're actually going to be loading it every 0.05 seconds, and then that way it's actually going to repeat across the screen. So let me show you how we're going to do this. We're going to hit B, and we're going to compare the length of the destination text to the width of the destination text. So to do this, we're going to double click, we're going to go system, and we're going to compare two values. Now this is actually one of the most used functions or conditions in Construct 2. So we're going to compare two values. It doesn't matter what values they are, you can compare anything. In this case, we're going to grab from our system objects with expressions. I'm going to type in len, and you can see here that I'm going to take this length, which is going to return me a string. So I'm going to say length of object dest text dot text. Now I want to find out if it's less than or equal to the length, or actually no, not the length, just object dest text dot width. So what this is saying now is every 5 seconds, find out if the text is less than the width. And in this case, if it is, which it will be until the text finishes, then what we're going to do is we're actually going to set the dest text. So let's go to our action here. Let's find our dest text and let's type in set text. And what we're going to do, and this is where we actually are able to scroll. Now you have other options besides this, but I'm going to show you this one. We're going to use system, and I'm going to type in left. Now this is going to return the first characters of a string from the left. There's also inversely the right, and I believe there is the mid. So we're going to use the left though, because that's pretty much how all scrolling text objects work. And we're going to say object source text dot text is going to be the first thing to put into the left function. Then we're going to find the length of dest text. So let's go object dest text dot text plus 0.05. That should be pretty good. So let's hit OK there. We might make that 0.05 into a variable just so we have that variable and we can control that variable, but having it at 0.05 statically is totally fine. Okay, so if this isn't making sense, it will in a second here. What we're going to do next is we're just going to set up a way for, actually, let's think. Do we want to set up? Let's set up for right now what will be where we call our sound function. So what we want to do here is we want to have a system repeat. I want to say repeat every time a character is shown. And what we want to do here is we want to hit C, and we want to actually do this again. We want to go system, compare two variables. We want to compare the length of object dest text, not the arrow ceiling, dest text, dot text, to check to see if it's not equal to the value of our length text. So I actually didn't make this yet. So let's just say 0 for right now. And let's actually make this a comment as to have scrolling sound. Okay, so if I've confused you by now, that's okay, because it's all going to make sense when we add in our keyboard control. So what we want to have happen here, and what we need to do for our conversation layer, is we need to put from our entities layer, we need to put this X button onto the conversation layer. So that way they know to press X. Hopefully they will understand by the big X in the corner here. And hopefully that fits the text box. Perfect. It does. So it doesn't go as far. So I can move this over a little bit here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say on X pressed from the keyboard or on X pressed from the gamepad. And what we want to do is we want to have this be a sub event like this. And we want to say just that. Let's go to our plugins, keyboard, on key pressed, click to choose X. Then let's hit Y, and let's hit C again, and let's go plugins, gamepad, on button pressed, and we're going to pick button X, just like that. Now, if these buttons are pressed, what we're going to do is we're going to find out if we can advance the text or not. And to do that, we need to grab our length text, which is what I did not have here. So we're going to make that a variable. We're going to make length text into the variable that will actually have our destination text, I believe. So let's go V on the keyboard. Let's type in length text, and let's have it equal 0. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, I'm trying to think what we want to set the length text to be. We really just want the length text to actually control a few things here, and really I used it for debugging purposes, but what we want it to do is we want it to be able to get how long our destination text is currently, and then from there we want to see if it's greater than how many characters can we move forward. So let's actually just add this in. So let's go to our keyboard here, let's hit B, and let's double click and let's go system, compare variable, and if the length text is greater than 5, and we'll set it up in a second. If the length text is greater than 5 characters long, then you can advance to the next thing. So to advance, what we need to do is we need to go to our destination text, and we need to set the text and clear it by just hitting OK. So we're going to clear the text, and then what we're going to do is add 1 to the number of lines. Let's go system, add 2, number of lines. So now this is going to go from intro 1 to intro 2, if you remember that from our XML sheet. So now that we're done with that, we should be able to set up a few more things here. Let's think. What we want to do now is we want to actually check to see if we are not overlapping with our signs. So to do so, I'm just going to hit this. I'm going to hit, I'm going to hit X on the keyboard. All of this should be nested into our overlapping, just so we are clear that we are overlapping our sign. And if we're not overlapping our sign, then what we want to have happen is the following. We want the convo box to be invisible, like so. And then we actually want to, well, we'll set the zoom here as well. So let's write set the zoom for the else statement to back to normal. All right, so we've done a whole lot, and let's see if at least for right this second, the convo box will pop up when we overlap, and it does, which is what we want. But we actually need to make this text show up. So let's think how we're going to do that. Okay, so for length text, what we want to set it to is in the every tick, we want to go add action system, set the value of length text to be object dest text dot text. And actually we want to make it the length of object dest text dot text. That way it constantly finds out how long that text object is, and I can move this all the way to the top. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to actually limit our sign IDs. So let's do that. The way that we're going to limit our sign IDs is actually very easily. What we're going to do is we're going to say what we want to have here is if the sign actually, you know what? Let's think. We want to just copy this essentially, or we want to put this over here. Let's think where we want to do this. We want these to be still overlapping, but we want this to be separate from these guys. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make a new sub event in here. I'm going to hit B, and I'm just going to copy this ID here, and I'm going to hit C on the keyboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in an additional check. I'm going to go system, compare the variable of number of lines, and for the first ID we have 4 lines, so I'm going to give it one thing of padding and say if the number of lines equals 5. So I'm going to do that, and what I want to have in here is I want to actually set the number of lines back to 1. So I'm going to say set the value of number of lines back to 1. Then I'm going to actually set the convo layer to invisible, so let me copy this and hit paste. And then after that, I'm going to set this entire group to activate and deactivate when it's finished. So this entire group is called the XML sign. And we can actually put this into another subgroup if we needed to, because we want to make sure that we can still overlap after that. So what we want to do for that is this. We're going to put, actually, you know what? We could probably leave all of it there. Let's actually just disable the overlap. So what we're going to do here is the same thing. We're going to say system group active, and this is going to be called XML dialog, I believe I called it. I guess I didn't call it XML dialog. I called it XML sign. Let's go system group active XML sign, and let's set it to deactivated. Sign is invalid value for a sign, XML space sign. That should be the group that we need to set to be. Okay, so let's rename our group because it's not happy with it. Let's just call it sign dialogue. And let's go here and let's say set the group active to be sign dialogue. And let's set it to deactivated and hit OK. Then what we want to do is we want to go system wait. We want to wait about 3 seconds, and then we want to set it back to active. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to actually get away from the sign for 3 seconds, and then it'll start to tell us again what's going on. And by limiting this, it should actually run through the lines. Let's hit play and let's see if it does just that. So if it's not showing up, we just have to figure out why that is. Let's think here. This is for our sound, so I think we're good there. This needs to be... Nope, we're all good there. This should essentially work every 5 seconds. What we need to do is we need to make sure that it's setting the source. So let's go and look at what I have up here. All right, so I figured out why it wasn't scrolling, and it's a very simple issue. I kind of reorganized us a little bit here, but it's nothing that you didn't already have. What I did do was I added 2 new text box objects to debug. So I added a length text box object, and I added a text box object called object NOL for a number of lines. And what this does here is on our conversation box, it'll tell us where we're at with the number of lines and how many characters are being displayed. Then here's our source text, and I was very confused as to why the source text was receiving the XML data, but it wasn't actually displaying it. And the reasoning was when we were adding right here plus 0.05, it was too slow and it wouldn't actually show the first character. It wouldn't show any of the characters. So we need to add 1 here. And what we can actually do is we can make a global variable, and we can call this our text speed, and we can set this to 1, and then we can add this plus our text speed. So if you wanted to mess around, if you wanted to make this go faster, you can do that. You can make it 5, and it'll go by probably words instead of characters. So now what else? All the other things that I did here was I just kind of reorganized. I have our Ajax loading here, loading all of our documents. So what I want to do is I just want to group this together, and we can call this XML Ajax. Doesn't really matter, but as long as you know what it is. And let's put that in there just so we can organize this a little bit more. Then here, and this is the important part, we have our number of lines and our sign IDs. So all of this code is going to stay the same for all of the IDs, but you want to know how many lines are in each sign. And fortunately, I already have that number down. But if you were to add your own text and your own XML files, you just want to know, and then you want to add 1 to give it just a little bit of padding so it can get a blank line at the end. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to copy and paste this, and we're going to say if the sign ID is equal to 1. Now we're going to go for 3 lines to display, so we're going to put 4. And this is actually just going to go down. So we're going to copy and paste, and if sign ID equals 2, then we're going to say number of lines equals 3, because there's only 2 lines for sign ID 2. And let's copy and paste if sign ID equals 3. Then we want number of lines. Actually, this one's going to go back up to 3 lines of text, so 4. Okay, so now we are pretty much good to go. Now we just need to hook in the XML signs to the corresponding things on the signs on the layout. So let me group this together. Let's call this our sign IDs, and let's put that in there. And now what we've done is we have every 5 seconds that you're overlapping, every 0.05 seconds, we are comparing the length of the destination text to the width. So if the width is less than or equal to, then it's going to grab from the left, and it's going to take whatever the source text has in it, so whatever this is equal to from the XML sheet, and it's going to display it character by character by adding 1. So that is how we are doing that. Then we're going to save this for our sound, and basically what this is going to say is for every character, it's going to play our scrolling sound noise, which is pretty cool. But then we have this. We have our X pressed or gamepad button X pressed. And what this is doing here is it's comparing how far along our characters are. So if it's greater than 5, which usually most XML documents, the reason why you would use this, has a statement that's greater than 5 characters, then you can actually go to the next you can go to the next sentence in that document if you had it. And technically what we could do is you could tie in this X button to only appear when the length is greater than 5. I'm not going to do that for right now, but I am going to show you this happening. So let's hit play, and let's move to the text here. And you can see this is going to be our characters as they are displaying, and this is what sentence we're on. So when we hit X, then we're going to the next one, or intro 2. And there we go, and I'm going to hit X again, and I'm going to let it play, and X again. Now I'm going to let this go, and I'm going to hit X one more time, and now it's going to wait 3 seconds because that's what we put in, and I'll show you right where that is, and then it's going to start again, but that way it gives me a chance to move around. Now we're going to add in a zoom feature after this so we can actually zoom in on this so it looks just a little bit more dynamic. Now what I want to show you here is, okay, we're past 5 characters, I can hit X and go to the next line. But if I hit and then try to hit before 5, we can't. So that's the whole point. And right here, I wanted to show you where we actually have our ID. What is it that I wanted to show you? Yes, where we're actually deactivating and activating our group, which we did for all of these. Technically, you could put all of these into one function and call the function all if you wanted to do it that way. It doesn't really matter. Again, it's up to you. But this is how we were doing our signs. It was a little bit more complex than I thought it would be to explain, but I hope you understand just exactly what we're trying to do here. So now what we can do is we have the fun part. We can lock our conversation layer, and we can copy our sign, and we can place it elsewhere. So a good place to put our sign might be right here instead of where I had it in the demo, and we can kind of put it up here. And then we'll give this the sign ID of 1, which ties it to the enemy's XML sheet. We can copy this and put it right over here for our power up. We can put this one over here, and we can give this the ID of 2 for the power up XML sheet, and we can copy and paste down here for the boss. Let's think where we want to put the boss. And I usually have it here, so let's just leave it here for right now. And this is going to display our boss. Okay, cool. So let's hit save, let's hit play, and let's see all of this working for us. So what we want to do here is we can skip this guy, but we can make sure that it's working. There we go. And let's go. Oh, now we can actually die. So let's go here. Sometimes they drop health too. That's if you lost it. If that didn't play all the way, let's see. Enemies, oh my. Jump on their heads to stop them from hurting you. Okay. Sometimes they drop health too. Let's think. We may not have waited long enough, which isn't a bug. It's just you have to wait the full 30 seconds. So I might just want to move this over. I mean the full 3 seconds. Let's push this over. Put this back to where I had it. Kind of like it over here anyway. Let's put this right here, and then I'll reset. But if you did want to fix that, all you'd have to do is change the timing of how long you're waiting to activate and deactivate. It's only 3 seconds, but then you can also reset the number that's not number of lines that's being displayed. So let's go over here. Let's go down here, and there we go. Enemies, oh my. We gave ourselves time for it to catch back up. Sometimes they drop health too. Awesome. So that's all reading. Let's go over here. Let's avoid these spikes if I can. I would like to not die, but I did. All right. I forgot that we implemented death now. Let's go all the way over here. And we have one last feature to add, which is zooming. And now zooming is an optional feature that I think I personally like, but it might not appeal to all of you, but it's just another thing that we can add to our gameplay. And I see right there our spike or our arrow needs to be fixed. Oh my god, I keep dying. So let's go put this, to just test this out, I'm going to grab our player. I'm going to put it right here, just so I can see what's going on and make sure that everything is working. Sometimes we need to lose the small battles in order to win the war. Collect the feather orb, and that'll tell us to actually go collect that, which is nice. Let's go all the way down here. Try to avoid all the spikes, which is actually fun. And of course I can't get up there, so let's move our player over here. And let's test it out over here and see if it's working. Sometimes we need to lose the battles. That's the wrong ID. Did I not change this ID? I did not. This needs to be 3. Let's hit save. And let's see if it'll now load the boss. Did you hear that? My sign senses are tingling. Careful traveler, a boss approaches. Cool. All right, so those are our signs, and that's how we set them up. I hope that this was a little bit easier for you to understand in the long run now that it's all set up. So let's do some zooming. And what we're going to do here is actually going to be a lot easier than you think. So we're going to make a new global variable. We're going to hit V on the keyboard and call this our zoom. I think we can leave it at 0 for right now. I don't think we need to change that to anything else. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create some zoom functionality. So let's hit B. And let's go system, compare variable. Let's go to our zoom, and we want to find out if it equals, let's set it to 1. If it equals 1, then what we want to do is we want it to be our normal camera. If it equals to 2, then we want it to zoom in. So let's do it this way. Copy and paste this, and if it equals to 2. So we're going to actually use the lerp function, which will lerp between 2 points or 2 numbers. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say if the zoom equals 1, then we're going to set the layout scale. So let's go system, let's type in layout scale, and we're going to set the layout scale, and as it says here, 1.0 for original size, 2.0 for double size, etc., etc. So what we're going to do here is we're going to lerp between, or linear interpolate between 2 points. So the first number is going to be the layout scale, whatever it's currently at. I'm going to type in layout scale. Then we're going to grab 1.0 because that's our actual original size that we want to interpolate between, and we're going to do 10 times delta time, so the frame before. So we're taking this and we are saying 10 times dt, or the frame that happened beforehand. What we're going to do from there is we're going to copy and paste and put this here, and the only thing we're going to change here is the number 1.0. We're going to have it lerp between 2.5, which will actually zoom us in a whole lot. Okay, so since zoom equals 0, none of these will be active, but let's hit G on the keyboard and call this our zoom. And let's put this in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to call or set the zoom variable every single time we go over every time we overlap the signs. So we're going to set the zoom, set the value of the zoom to 2, else we're going to set it back to 1, just like that. So let's see how that looks, and let's see if that works. So we overlap and we zoom in, and if we're not overlapping, we zoom back out, and it has this nice lerping effect that kind of looks like it's fluid transition to zoom in and out, and you can use that for other things too. I think we're actually going to use that for our boss. So like when we get too close to the boss, it might zoom in a little bit. Maybe we'll have it zoom out too. But there we go. So we can just remove these from our debug if you have them debugging your game. But we did a whole lot this lecture. Oh, you know what? We're going to have to set the zoom out. We're going to have to set the zoom out elsewhere. Let's think we're going to set the zoom out. We can set it to... Where else do we want to set this to actually zoom out from? We can set it to zoom out for all of our IDs. So let's put this before we wait. Let's do it before we deactivate altogether. And let's put that there, and that should fix that bug. And let's put that there. All right, so let's double check that and make sure that that works flawlessly now, where I can walk and I can walk away no matter what point in the conversation I am at, and I can. Let's see how far I can get. So this has been a whole lot, and so far all of the video tutorials have been a whole lot of information. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me any way that you can, or feel free to just try and solve it on your own and see if you can test yourself. Watch these videos over again because I do talk a lot, and I hope that you're getting enough out of me talking a lot for these longer videos than what I would usually do, which would be a shorter video. And I hope that these longer videos are more helpful to your timing, so you can pause, you can fast forward. And I just really hope that this isn't as boring for you at the moment, because there isn't any sound and there isn't any action going on, but there's still a whole lot of gameplay elements that we've put in a very quick amount of time. And I'm very proud of these gameplay elements because they are things that you want to have in your games, because they just make your game feel classic, which is really nice. Let me fix this spike real fast, just because it's not... there we go. Let's actually turn off snap to grid, and there we go. perfect. So I really do hope that you're getting a lot out of these video tutorials. I'm really excited for the next video tutorial where we can go over the enemy AI and we can get into the boss stuff. And then after that, we can start to polish it all up with some main menu, music, sound effects, and everything else. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next